Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. It's hot takes, let's get into it. Most people only put Wilt and Bill in their top 10 because they feel it would be sacrilegious not to. It is perfectly fine to exclude them. Me personally, I do have Bill Russell in my top 10, but he's probably at like number 9. And Wilt Chamberlain's at like number 13 for me, I think. I personally, I won't go into this too much because I've talked about it plenty. Personally think Wilt is pretty fucking overrated because I personally, at least, super duper value winning, and I think there were many things that he did, the way he approached his play style, that was antithetical to that. And the thing that drives me nuts is like the reason he's propped up are his ridiculous numbers, but his ridiculous numbers are the reason why he was not a winner. And for me, I care more about winning than numbers, and I'm impressed by the numbers. Who the fuck isn't? But I'm going to put a player that I believe to be a more winning player with an attitude more towards winning and willing to sacrifice those numbers over him. And there are a handful of players throughout league history, over 10, that I think were on that level of talent that also did better to actually be a winning player. Bill Russell, on the other hand, 11 championships is hard to argue with. I know he played in a weird era with a lot of weird rules and a weird context, but he did play legitimate competition often. The amount of times that the Celtics almost lost, they actually played a handful of game sevens throughout their multiple different whether it be the finals or conference finals. And really, they only lost one fucking time throughout all of that. And it was to Wilt Chamberlain the 1 year that he sacrificed his stats. So I think he belongs in the top 10. And I don't think that's an arbitrary, like, we just have to put him there by default. Wilt, though, I can agree with that. There are a lot of people who think Wilt is just clear of Russell, and maybe as talents that is true, but there's a lot more to basketball than just talent. Russell brought everything else to the table at a far better level. Apparently we have two Wilt takes back to back. I'd probably poor ordering on my part, but Wilt is the most dominant player of all time, not Shaq. Dominance to me results in winning. I don't give a fuck how good your stats are or how hard you are to stop as a scorer, hard you are to keep off of the glass if you are not winning. Just for a rebounding example, like Andre Drummond wasn't a fucking ridiculously dominant rebounding player, but team didn't win jack shit. Bradley Beal, a really dominant scoring threat, averaging like 32 points per game 1 year. His team wasn't good. That type of stuff. Again, the numbers thing. People get hung up on the numbers so much. Shaquille O'Neal at his peak was the best player for 3 championships. Okay? I don't want to hear it. I do not want to hear it. He was the best player for those championships while putting up ridiculous numbers. Meanwhile, Wilt Chamberlain put up ridiculous numbers and lost, and then when he won, put up far, far, far less ridiculous numbers. His first title, numbers are pretty nuts. I'll give you that. Not the 50, 25, 48.5 minutes that you got in that 1 year, but still like 24, 18, and 7. God knows how many blocks. But yeah, Shaq won alongside having ridiculous numbers. Look at that man's postseason numbers for those championships. It is off the fucking charts. The Blazers have the potential to lock up a 5 to 8 seed. We've seen what Anthony has done without Dame. Portland has Ayton's resurrection written all over it, and the rest of their young bucks have the potential to be really nice. I really like this roster. I think they're going to be fun, and I think they're going to be pretty competitive, but absolutely not. There's just no fucking way in the Western Conference this team is a playoff team. It just isn't. There is not enough established talent here. Everybody outside of Anthony Simons and I guess Jeremy Grant are just real question marks. Who's to say how Scoot Henderson's going to translate immediately? Maybe if Scoot Henderson's like excellent right out of the gate, then sure, I could see it. But I'm expecting him to take some time to develop and not just be a star level player from day one. Anthony Simons, yeah, we saw what he could do without Dame, which was put put up a lot of numbers and lose. So I don't know about that. And yeah, I believe DeAndre Ayton will be a lot better in Portland than he has been in Phoenix, but not so much better that it's going to be like elevating a team that should be at the bottom of the conference to a 5 seed. That's just delusional, especially in this Western Conference where, as I have highlighted before, there are 11 teams that could legitimately be 50-win caliber teams. So, no, that's just not going to happen. Dame to the Bucks doesn't make them title favorites over Denver. For me, obviously, I'm a very big Nuggets guy. I called them being a championship core a long time ago. I said just as soon as you get those guys healthy, they're really genuinely competing for titles. And the first time they got healthy, they immediately won a title. So I have a lot of personal pride tied up in the success of that team. And I really, really, really like that team. I really love the offense of that team because it's just such a well-oiled machine, and I appreciate that type of scheme. That said, I do think the Bucks are better. I do. It'd be one thing if Denver was like also deep, but the fact that, you know, they're also pretty much only 6 players that I'm confident are playoff rotation caliber, and the Bucks only really have 6 players that I'm confident are playoff rotation caliber. With that being the case, I definitely think that the Bucks have the better starting lineup. They have the more talented starting lineup, and sure, the Nuggets offensive scheme is ridiculous and they're very, very talented, but I think Dame and Giannis just has a level of unstoppability to it that even Denver can't quite compete with. Not to mention that the Bucks, I think, will probably be a little bit better defensively, and I think the Bucks have a better matchup in terms of like actually guarding Jokic. I think the big body of Brook with Giannis roaming, that's probably the best matchup that you could really conceivably have against Jokic. Now, I'm not going to do the foolish thing that a lot of people do, which is say that they're going to shut Jokic down, because literally nobody can do that. But they could probably bother him more than anybody else, which is to say they could probably bother him 10% of the time, because that's technically still more than anybody else. And in a completely polar opposite point of view, the Nuggets have basically no chance against a healthy Bucks. Jokic post-ups will be on the best paint defense in the league. Hey, I made that point. And no one on Denver gets near Dame or Giannis with their teammates draining threes. Yeah, if the floor is spaced properly enough for the Bucks, then man, the prospect of like, if Malik Beasley hits, which I really think he could, if he's back to being like a 40% three-point shooter on 7 attempts per game, can't leave that guy open. Maybe it'd be Pat Connaughton also on the perimeter and Chris Middleton. Like, Jesus, that's so difficult to stop. Brook Lopez in the corner. I mean, he's probably the biggest guy you could sag off of because, as I say all the time with Brook Lopez, solid three-point shooter. He's not great just because he's a center that can shoot threes. That's a weird mix that happens there, where if you're a 5 that can shoot, they treat you like you're a god-tier shooter, when in reality, teams will choose to leave Brook Lopez open from outside regularly in the postseason. So Brook would probably be the only weak link there, but it's not that weak of a link. And just Dame and Giannis in a pick and roll is such a ridiculous prospect. And like, you can throw Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon at that, have Jokic ready to bring help defense and slide over, and it will probably work okay. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, there's just a degree of unstoppability. That said, they absolutely have a chance to beat the Bucks. That the Nuggets were too good and too dominant to say that really they don't have a chance against basically any team ever. They lost 4 games on the way to the finals, or on their way to a title, I should say, because one of those losses was in the finals. So yeah, they're such a good team. I don't understand why people still are discounting how good the Denver Nuggets can be. I think the Bucks will be better. I think they could be better at least, but absolutely do not dismiss the Nuggets. That final series should be, assuming that's what happens, should be a classic, and I would predict it would go 6 or 7. Dame is the second best shooter ever behind Steph. I have seen this argument before, just purely because he is obviously more versatile in his three-point shooting. When you're comparing all-time three-point shooters, you have to take into consideration how deep those shots are, how many of them are off of the dribble. And guys like Reggie Miller, Ray Allen, Klay Thompson, far less of an off the dribble game than Damian Lillard has. That said, I think they kind of make up for that and just having a better percentage. I don't even know if Dame has shot 40% from three in a season, and if he has, it hasn't happened often. I mean, he's gotten to like 37, 38 regularly, and I'd imagine that's around what his career average is, but there's just enough guys who can match his volume, maybe not match his versatility as a shooter, but are up there with him in attempts while also being a higher percentage shooter. Dame is a top 5 shooter of all time, and honestly, after Steph, I think there are a couple of answers you could have for number 2 that are not ridiculous. I really think Reggie, Clay, or Ray Allen all have a real shot at that number 2 spot, and I'm not that mad at you saying Dame does too. Michael Jordan would have only won 2 to 3 championships without Scottie Pippen. I mean, I prefer that take to the he wouldn't have won any. 2 to 3 is far more reasonable, because what really bothers me about the way that people talk about this particular thing is that the Bulls, in many of their playoff runs, Scottie Pippen kind of disappeared, especially in that second three-peat. I would argue Scottie was far more instrumental and far more important to the success of the Chicago Bulls in their first three-peat than he was in their second. Not only was he often a distraction, although justifiably so given how much he was being underpaid, but a distraction nonetheless, and his scoring just completely falls off in the postseason. Not that it was ever great to begin with. He's obviously still bringing the defense, still bringing the playmaking, and still a very, very, very good player, but there are ways to replicate the level of production that Scottie Pippen had on that second three-peat that a lot of other players would have been capable of. Like, if obviously Scottie for Shawn Kemp almost happened, and Scottie was pretty instrumental in Michael coming back, but let's say that the Bulls did trade Scottie for Shawn Kemp in 1995 and Michael Jordan came back to Shawn Kemp, the Bulls absolutely still would have won a championship or 2 at the very least. But the earlier years, when Scottie was younger and both MJ and Scottie were younger, they were just absolutely terrorizing teams on the perimeter to a comical degree. They were still doing it when they were older, but Scottie was also far more of a scoring threat, which made it harder to bring doubles onto Mike. So yeah, I do think that Mike still would have won titles without Scottie, but he would have won less. I think this is probably the most reasonable, nuanced perspective on this actual topic, far more than most people ever give it. But yeah, that is it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.